Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Ellis.
And today we are going to be talking about the Gospels.
Yeah.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
All right. What was something you really wanted to do as a kid but never had the opportunity to do?
Oh, Space Camp.
Space camp.
100%.
Nice.
No, there was a movie I saw on TV whenever I was little, and it was about like these group of kids, like they went to space camp, and I don't remember all of the movie, but I know they solved the problem, figured it out, and saved the world. And just, I don't remember what they did to save the world or what they were saving it from, but I do remember that was like what happened in it. And that, like, always wanted to do space camp after that. Thought it would be awesome. Never got to do it.
Yeah.
You?
I think I mentioned this on here before, but I didn't own my own Xbox until college. So, like, growing up, I just wanted a gaming console of some kind. So I was, like, always at friends' houses or at cousins' houses or whatever, mooching off of theirs, playing whatever games they had. And I was like, yo, I just want my own Xbox. So, yeah, that was it.
You'd go back in time and get that Xbox.
I would, yes.
What game would you get on there?
Pretty much the only game I played back then was Madden. So
nice.
It'd probably be like, Madden 06 or whatever year it would have been on back then. Yeah. So
no, love Madden. That was like a thing we would do in the barracks all the time in the Army. Like we would have Madden tournaments. It got pretty competitive, kind of feisty, but it was such a blast playing that game.
I'm pretty sure Vince Young was on the cover of Madden 06, which wow, throwback.
That is a throwback.
His NFL career, not what you would have thought it would have been.
I'd like to see a follow-up of like all of the athletes that have appeared on either like MLB The Show or Madden or that just kind of floundered and didn't really live up to what they were hyped to do.
There's like a YouTube series there just waiting to be put together by someone. I don't know. So
that might be something.
Yeah.
All right. Popular food ingredient, spice, or herb that you I hate that turmeric, or actually I love turmeric. So but what popular food ingredient, spice, or herb that you dislike?
Chili pepper flakes? Does that qualify?
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a love-hate relationship with them. Like it's like the littlest bit too much. It's like, whoa. This is too much for me. There was one time, Abby's going to hate that I said this on the podcast. She made some pasta with chili pepper flakes in it, and, she measured with her heart. Let's put it that way. And, yo.
She measured with her heart.
It was spicy as heck. My mouth was tingling for like 30 minutes after we were done eating. So, yeah, chili pepper flakes.
I would like to see how that plays out. It calls for a dash. Never. Just like a salt-based thing. Just raining chili pepper flakes. I love that as like this as a way to describe something measured with your heart.
Yep.
Yeah. Love it.
We saw that on TikTok one time, and we quote it all the time. Oh, I'm just going to measure with my heart here. Yep. So that time, she measured with her heart.
There we go. I mean, I don't know if it counts as like a food ingredient, but like just pickles, like anything pickled that's been saturated in vinegar.
Yes.
Can't do it.
That's a good call.
Like anytime I make something, like if it like, or I go to a restaurant or something, like something has pickles on it, like just don't even put them on my plate. I don't like the way they smell, taste. I mean, that could probably pickled eggs, pickled cucumbers, like all the things. Not for me.
Like y'all know, I don't like mayonnaise. Pickles might be the worst thing you can put on a sandwich, including mayonnaise.
No, I'm still not with you on mayonnaise. I think we need to get like a selection of different mayonnaises, like Duke's, Hellman's, Miracle Whip's not mayonnaise, but I'm sure like we could find one that you like. But no, pickles, keep them.
Yeah,
don't want them.
I'm good. Leave them in the
fridge. I
fridge.
was little. Yeah, don't even get them out.
What about relish?
Now, like as an ingredient in like if you're making like a homemade Big Mac, like
Okay.
and you get like and you're making the Big Mac sauce, like that has ketchup. What else is in there? That has relish in it.
But just a spoonful of relish.
Oh no, miss
No,
me with
I mean
that.
I'm not putting relish on a hot dog or
Nope.
anything like that.
It's so good.
No, it's really not.
Nope.
No, I'm not eating it. Like as an ingredient in something where like the ratio of relish to the other thing is like 1,000 to 1.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I can put it in there.
I would find it like
That's like one single cube of relish.
That's all I'm doing.
I would consider it a character flaw if we just went on about how bad pickles are, and then you were like, just grind up pickles, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I want that.
No, like I'm not putting it in like on the thing, but like it's an ingredient in Big Mac sauce.
Make pickles into paste form. Yes, that I would enjoy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. But so just to get back on track, so we're going to be talking about the Gospels
Yes.
today. So had you heard the term gospel before you'd become a Christian, or like, do you remember like what did you think they were?
I think my mind would have gone to like gospel music immediately.
Yeah.
So I would have pictured like people in robes singing for 12 minutes,
Yeah.
sweating it up. Like I think that's probably the image I had in my head when I heard the word gospel back then.
I think mine probably would have been, I mean, I don't remember, but like I do have vivid memories of like TV preachers, like this isn't the Bible, but like waving the Bible around saying it's in the gospel.
There you go.
Like we should have had Madison do that voice.
You're right.
But
Yep.
but so it always had like a kind of a like I'm going to beat you with the gospel. Like so it wouldn't have been a positive one.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that it meant specifically like the first 4 books of the New Testament.
Yeah. Very cool. What's your favorite book in the Gospels?
I mean, it changes like over time and like where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like just in life. We're gonna get into it in a little bit. Like if I'm looking for a fast paced, like action oriented, go out there doing the things Jesus, like I'm kind of spending a lot of time in Mark. But I do think like on the reg, probably John, like the way that he writes. And like the long monologues from Jesus in there, and just the way that he, presents Jesus as this divine, being that existed before creation and is going to be there after it. Like I probably spend more time there than the other ones.
Yeah.
You?
I have an appreciation for Mark similar to what you just said. Like I think it's really cool to imagine Mark going along with Jesus as he's doing all these things and like scribbling down an account as he goes, like, oh, I gotta get this down.
Yeah.
Like that like, can you imagine like can he even imagine the significance of what he was recording then? But anyway, that's not my answer. My answer, I'm gonna go with Luke because
Okay.
I'm a details guy. Give me all the details, all the context.
Yes.
Like I want all that stuff. So I really appreciate Luke including all the stuff that he does. So
I imagine Luke, like he was a doctor, like he was a physician, he was a highly educated like fellow, and I imagine him like sitting down and plotting out, okay, so I'm gonna go get this, like find out what exactly happened, who are the main players that are still around that I can go and get with, and then just jotting it all down, making a flow chart, and then going out and executing. Like I imagine him as that type of guy.
yeah.
So we're going to be looking at a couple things here. We're going to be looking at like what are the synoptic gospels, and then from there, where are we going from there? We're going to be looking at like we're going to be comparing and contrasting like the different books, like seeing what's in one, what's in the other, and then we're going to look at what's called like a Christology, like just what type of picture of Jesus is presented in each one of the gospels. So Ellis, tell us about the synoptic gospels.
Yeah. So, first of all, what is a synoptic gospel, if I can get it out of my mouth? The word synoptic comes from Latin and Greek roots. The Latin word is synopticus, and in Greek it's synoptikos, like with a K-O-S. But basically what those mean, it's seeing all together, or synopsis. Kind of in modern English, it's like giving an account of events from the same point of view, or from the same aspect, kind of. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they're referred to as the synoptic gospels because they include many of the same stories in a similar order and containing similar or in some cases identical wording.
Yes.
John's gospel is a little different because it covers a little bit of a different time span than the others. It pinpoints a lot of Jesus' ministry in a specific location, and it describes Jesus having more theological conversations and things like that. So, yeah.
And like that's the only one where you get like just monologues like
Yes.
that run chapter after chapter from Jesus.
Yeah.
It begs the question like which one came first, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. And it's widely accepted that Mark is the oldest one, and the other gospels, you know, they quote all but 31 verses of Mark.
That's wild.
Like are represented in the other 3.
Yeah.
And so that kind of makes it, you know, almost like a source for some of the for the other ones that were written that came after. So whenever we get into Matthew, give us the who's he writing to, who is Matthew, like all the things. That's kind of how we're going to run down each one of these as we just do a quick overview of the 4 gospels.
Yeah. So, first of all, it was really cool. I don't know about you. It was really cool diving into this section because all the times I've read the gospel, some of this stuff, like the context around it, I didn't know until I started digging into it for this. So Matthew, who was he writing to? It's widely accepted. And there's evidence to support that Matthew was written like specifically for the Jewish people. That that was his target audience, meaning not the Gentiles. Like the Jewish people, God's chosen people. That's kind of who he was writing to. It really focuses on the fulfillment of the Old Testament. And there's like direct references to that 62 times in Matthew's gospel. And there's like kind of something to support that is he doesn't explain Jewish culture like some of the other gospels do. For example,
Luke specifically.
Yeah, Luke specifically. For example, in John chapter 19, verse 40, it says, taking Jesus' body, this is after Jesus has been crucified, they're taking his body to prepare to be buried. Taking Jesus' body, the 2 of them wrapped it with the spices in strips of linen. This is in accordance with the Jewish burial customs. Like there's context in the other ones like that to kind of explain what's going on that you don't find in Matthew because of the audience he's writing to. Matthew's the only gospel writer to use the phrase kingdom of heaven, which is considered a reverential Jewish expression. So it's very specifically targeted. And kind of the overall point that Matthew's gospel is driving towards is Jesus as not just the Messiah, the expected Messiah. Like, you take into account the prophecies and things that come before this, like this was the outcome everybody was expecting. And the genealogy of Jesus that Matthew includes and his resurrection is kind of used as proof of this. Like,
yes.
Hey, this is here at the beginning because this is kind of where we're going. So
no, and like just to back up the point that you made about it being written specifically to a Jewish audience, like he goes out of his way, you know, showing how Jesus fulfilled all of these prophecies, using the lineage, because they would have been expecting it to the Messiah to be coming from like the line of David. Like he's like, listen, my fellow Jews, like this is the guy like we've been waiting for. Look at all of the things he did. Like he's very much saying, hey, like we found him. This is him. Let me tell you about him.
Yeah.
So I think that just very much backs up the case that that's who he's writing for. And that's something that we're going to come back to later, because all of these, they're writing to a specific group of people to convince them and teach them about who Jesus is.
Yep.
And so if you're going to do that, you're going to tailor your message to that particular group of people.
Sure. Yeah.
So that brings us to Mark. So John Mark, he's not one of the original disciples, but he did accompany Paul on his first missionary journey. And we read that in Acts 12:25. When Barnabas and Saul had finished their mission, they returned from Jerusalem, taking with them John, also called Mark. And eventually there seems to have been some sort of disagreement between the fellas, as it is. It's really unclear as to what that disagreement was. And Mark returned to Jerusalem early, and then later in chapter 15, Barnabas, Paul's companion, wanted to bring Mark on the next journey. Paul disagreed and was like, no, I don't want to bring that dude. He dipped out before. And then this led to Barnabas breaking away with Mark and Paul taking someone else with him on that journey. And so who was he writing to? Early Christians in Rome. which is where this was written, roughly between AD 55 and AD 65. Some folks put it out at like maybe AD 80, but that seems, just from looking at it, that seemed to be kind of like an outlier. And whenever you look at like the overall point he was trying to make, but I want to back up.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't address anything as far as like who Jesus was, his background, his lineage. It just pops off with like his baptism. Like, that's where he's just jumping right in. He's like, so it didn't seem like it was for a Jewish audience. He's writing to a completely different crowd. So the overall point that I think he was trying to make was that Jesus is the Messiah and Son of God. Like, and he comes right out the booth with that. Mark 1:1. The beginning of the good news about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. Like, he's telling you, this is who we found. And it's here that we see from the outset that Mark viewed and planned to present Jesus as both. He's presenting Jesus as both Messiah and the Son of God. Messiah basically just means anointed one.
Right.
And Jesus as one that is unique in relation to God the Father, could be the only one that could serve as the long-awaited Messiah. And his gospel, and to demonstrate that, like, his gospel has more miracles than any of the other gospels, and that would have been something that would have been appealing to a if you're just going out to the world and saying, hey, let me tell you about this guy, look at all the things he did. Like, he's clearly unique and set apart from everybody else that's ever existed.
Right.
So that's kind of the rundown of Mark.
Cool. All right, well, let's go to Luke. Who was he writing to? Well, he straight up tells us, so we don't have to guess, which is pretty cool.
Which is always nice.
Yeah. This is right at the beginning of Luke chapter 1. Many people have set out to write accounts about the events that have been fulfilled among us. They use the eyewitness reports circulating among us from the early disciples. Having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I also have decided to write a careful account for you, most honorable Theophilus, and so you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. It's very much reads kind of like a research paper or something,
it does.
You know? So, as you can kind of take away from that scripture, Luke's gospel, it's based off the accounts of some of the other disciples, which appears to confirm that his account was written later. He kind of had the benefit of hindsight and the ability to go talk to people and gather all the information to get his account together. So he mentions Theophilus in that scripture we read. So who's Theophilus? Well, the name Theophilus means lover or friend of God. And he also... go ahead.
No, because Theo means God.
There you go.
Like the theology study of God.
Right, yeah. He also refers to him as most honorable Theophilus. So we can assume he was a man of status or influence of some kind. And so the overall point that Luke is trying to make with what he writes is kind of unclear. There's some debate over this. There's people who say he's trying to make the case for Christianity as not being a threat to the Roman Empire. And there's others who say, Luke's gospel is kind of incomplete without the book of Acts, which Luke also wrote. Because both books were, in tandem, were intended to be distributed for ecclesiastical purposes, basically for the church, to build the church, to educate the church, things like that. So,
and they flow if John wasn't there, it would flow, if they just reshuffled the order a little bit, it flows right into it.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a break.
Yep. If there was a Hollywood movie, they would release it as part 1 and part 2. Yes. So there you go.
So whenever you read his is the most, it reads like a research paper, like you said, it's got a clear start. It's got it just flows right through. These are the things that I'm finding. And this is he's just making the case for, this is what everybody is saying. This is the eyewitness accounts. This is what everybody said. This is what they experienced. And he's just passing that along.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then that brings us to John, which is, like we've mentioned before, is just different than the other one. It's not a clear, concise thing. You get monologues here. You get way more flowery language. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and everything that was created came through this Word. And all of the things, you just get a very spiritual, divine, all eternal, all of that. But who is John? So John was an apostle, one of the sons of Zebedee and brother of James. That together they were both known as the sons of thunder, which is just a dope nickname.
That's so
like
awesome.
if you're going to get one, like what better moniker like to carry? Like I'm a son of thunder.
I would introduce myself with that everywhere I went.
I'm Michael, son of thunder.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Like I mean, of all the nicknames, like that's just sick. All right, so who is he writing to? Primarily new Christians, like those that are just coming to the faith or just spiritually curious non-believers, which, like if you've already got that prompt and that nudge, to learn more about who Jesus is, this is just such a great one to just jump into, because it just starts painting a picture like right out of the gate. And just kind of like the overall point he was, that trying to make, that Jesus existed before creation and all was created through him. I mean, that's Jesus was the Word was with God, and like all of that, like that's verse 1. That Jesus is the source of salvation, and that anyone who believes in him will have eternal life. That's a drum that just is beat constantly throughout it. And it's also the only place where you have, like, whenever we do our episode on like who was Jesus, where all of those I am statements that come from Jesus, like all of those are in John. Like those are all unique to him.
Yep.
And in John 20:31, just to kind of say why he wrote it, I mean, he kind of tells us here, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
Yeah.
And so that's, kind of like Luke, he's telling you why he wrote this here.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, whereas some of the other ones, it's like, hey, here's Jesus, the person who walked on earth. This one is kind of like, hey, here's Jesus, kind of like Jesus, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He's all of it. He's in all of it. And also, I think it's cool what you said about it being written to new Christians, people who are curious. Like, I think, I don't know about you, when people ask me, like, which one, where should I start? Which one of the Gospels should I read? Usually my answer is Mark, because it's the shortest and easiest to get through, but maybe it should be John, considering it's directly written to.
Yeah. And I think I started in Matthew whenever I first started, just because you don't know what you don't know. So you just go to the start of whatever it is. Yep. And so like that one came first. And so that's where I'm going to start. But then, if you're just an outsider and you're brand new, like you're snoozing by the time you get to the fourth, and then he was the son of.
Yep. It's true.
Begat.
Or you just skip it. One or the other,
which happens.
Yeah.
But if you want to get like that, who is Jesus? Like the big picture Jesus. For me now looking at it, like, I'm with you. Like, I think John might be the way to go after looking at it.
That's cool.
So now let's start comparing and contrasting. So what are some things that all of them have in common?
Yeah. So there's a list of a few things that you'll find in any of the four, all of the four. Kind of going to the best of our ability in chronological order here. Number 1, John the Baptist. John the Baptist, if you don't know who he is, he's the one who kind of came before Jesus to make the way for Jesus. And there were people who thought, is this the guy we're waiting for? And John told them, not to be confused with John, the gospel writer, different John. John the Baptist told them, no, I'm just preparing the way. There's one greater than me coming.
And I'm not fit to tie his sandals.
Right. So John the Baptist and kind of his activity before Jesus arrived. Number 2, feeding of the 5,000. You'll find that across the board. The prophecy of Jesus' triumphal entry being fulfilled is one you'll find across the board. That prophecy is in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey's colt. That story is where we get Palm Sunday from. Jesus is riding into Jerusalem on the donkey. People are laying leaves and clothes and things for him to walk over as he arrives. So that you'll find that in all 4. Judas's betrayal is in all 4.
Yeah.
Kind of have to include that. Can't miss that. Kind of like you can't with Peter's denial. That's also in all 4.
Never let him off the hook.
These are like, the rest of these is like, well, yeah, okay. The trial and crucifixion in all 4. The resurrection in all 4. And some kind of reference, even though it might not be consistent or the same across all 4, a reference to Jesus' eventual return is found in all 4. So that's the list.
And so just some things that are different, because there are some things that are only mentioned in like one book or in one of the Gospels. So the repentant thief that was, when Jesus was crucified, there was two other fellas that he was crucified. Like Jesus was in the middle and like there was, a guy on either side. And all of them mentioned how they mocked and like trash talked Jesus. Like such a weird thing. Like we're all hanging there. We're all about to die, but you're going to talk smack. Yeah. Like it's just a weird flex. But, only in Luke does it mention that one of them eventually repented. And in Luke 23, starting in 40, but the other criminal rebuked him. They were both, now they're still talking smack. And then one of them, I guess, had a change of heart and said, but the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you're under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man did nothing wrong. And then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. And Matthew and Mark only mentioned that they mocked him. So, that's something that you only find there. The parable of the growing seed, that one's only in Mark, and in Mark 4:26 through 29. He also said, this is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself, the soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. And as soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it because the harvest has come. That's that lesson about, what the kingdom of God is like. That's only found in Mark. A couple things that are unique to Matthew, and, I think this is partially because like he's writing to a primarily Jewish audience regarding Joseph's dream that Joseph had whenever he was trying to decide whether or not, am I just going to quietly just kind of push Mary right out the old door, or what should I do? Like an angel came to him in his dream. That's only there. Judas's death, where he eventually like took his own life, that's only recorded in Matthew. Like we all got him betraying him, but this is the only place where you find out like what happened. The wise men's visit, like the three magi that came with the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, like what we see every year at Christmas, like that's only there. As well as the slaughter of the innocents, where King Herod went boom, boom, banana bread, cray, cray, as my kids say. That's a good one. But that's only in Matthew as well. Yeah. So, and then whenever we look at John, there's a couple things in 8 that are only unique to him. So differences in John 8, it's the only place, but I'm only going to pick one. But this is where we see the teaching regarding the adulterous woman verse, where all of these folks they drag this woman out into this like the little town square or whatever, and they're deciding what they're going to do with her. She's been caught in adultery and all this stuff, and Jesus, they're saying, well, what should we do with this woman? The law of Moses says to do this, and Jesus, just like a boss, like I just imagine this, like he drops down, he starts writing things in the sand, and like evidently just blows everybody's mind, and then he basically says, let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And then again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. That's John 8:7 and 8.
Mic drop.
Yes. And then he told the woman, go and sin no more. So I mean, that's something, and that's such a powerful thing that everybody's heard of that one. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. That's only pops up in one spot.
Wow.
And that's there. So those are some things that there are differences between the four, and instead of just pretending like they're not there, like it's okay to say like this, they're only in one spot.
Yeah. So if somebody were to ask you, why are there inconsistencies? How would you answer that question?
That's where we shift gears into this next part, where we're talking about Christology and like a different portrait of Jesus in each thing. And so, the Gospels, I jotted this down because I wanted to make sure I got this right. So like the Gospels have been described as like biographical sermons. They're biographies in that they attempt to inform and tell us, who Jesus is. But they're sermons in that they aim not merely to inform, but also to inspire, persuade, and elicit a response in the reader. Like they wrote this in the hopes that you would be changed and transformed by it in some way. So where multiple sources of the same presentation exist, inevitably those presentations are both alike and slightly different. Like you can think of it in terms of like remakes.
Okay.
Just to be kind of just make it to where everybody can kind of see where we're going.
Sure.
Like, think of like the 1960s Batman.
Adam West.
Like the Adam West Batman. He's campy. He's still an awesome detective. Like, he's still out there just cracking skulls and doing the bam and the pals and all of that. But then, but there's a couple things that are still all the same there. He's still a rich dude. He's still mega smart. Like, he's still got a guy named Alfred, like, just watching his back, doing this thing. And then kind of fast forward to like Michael Keaton's Batman. A little bit more dark, a little bit more broody, kind of crazy, but still super smart, got all the things. And then like the Christopher Nolan Batman, the Christian Bale or Christian Bale's Batman. Yep. And then, kind of look at it, then you got the Ben Affleck Batman. Like, they're all Batman, but they're all slightly different because we're looking at Batman through a different storyteller's eyes.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where the portrait of Jesus comes through. Like, you're looking at it through that storyteller and that writer's eyes.
Yeah. So Batman's different to different directors or writers or whoever, and Jesus is different to different people who are recording his life and what they saw.
Yes. So you're just getting a different portrait of him, and that's what Christology means.
Cool.
Now that we got kind of that wrapped up.
Yeah.
So, like, what type of portrait of Jesus? Like, we talked about, like, who he was writing to, all of those things.
Yeah.
But, like, what type of Jesus or what portrait of Jesus comes through in the book of Matthew?
So, Matthew is very much presenting Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. Like, hey, the Jewish people specifically, God's chosen people, they have, like, gone through this whole journey of having to escape from captivity and been, like, almost able to go into the promised land, then not, had to wait, like, we could spend a whole episode on that.
Yes.
But they've gone on this whole journey. They've been waiting for their Savior to come. And so it very much presents Jesus as, hey, this is the Messiah for the Jewish people. Some places you'll read, like, they consider Jesus the new Moses. He's been appointed by God to free his people from bondage and give them the law, in this case, the new law, not the Ten Commandments law, like Moses. They even parallel the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus delivers the law of God while standing on a mountain. Moses receives the Ten Commandments while standing on a mountain from God. So, yeah. So,
and then, in Mark, I mean, like we mentioned a second ago, like, he comes right out of the gate and says, I'm going to tell you about the Son of God. Yeah. So that's the figure that Mark presents at the beginning and says, this is who I'm going to tell you about. And so we're told that we're going to be reading about him. And so Mark opens with telling us that this is the prophesied one. And this is a Jesus that is unique and special. And at his baptism, like, God's voice is heard, like, declaring him, he is my son. And so a Jesus that has authority, like, because he does all of the miracles in this one. This is a Jesus that has authority to cast out demons, heal all ailments. We see a Jesus that literally has command over, like, life and death itself. And he's just a powerful, miracle working, just getting things done Jesus. And that's kind of the portrait that, comes through whenever you read it. Like, I'm an all powerful, like the Ben Affleck Batman. Yeah. Like, he's just out there crushing it, like, all over the place. Yeah. So that's who bleeds through in Mark.
Gotcha. Superhero Jesus.
Yes.
So in Luke, we kind of get the compassionate Jesus. We get kind of a lot of the accounts of him caring for the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized, people like Samaritans, people like the Gentiles, people like women. So there's a lot more time and focus dedicated there in Luke. There's also, like, some subtle differences in how Luke records the genealogy to reflect that. Matthew, for example, traces Jesus' genealogy to Abraham. Jesus' genealogy, goodness, that's a mouthful, to Abraham, the father of the Jewish people. Luke's genealogy goes all the way back to Adam, the father of humanity, the father of all people. So it becomes kind of an inclusive thing, a compassionate thing for all people who are there. So
and that takes Jesus just, from a Jewish Messiah to the Messiah and Savior of all mankind. So that brings us to John. Jesus is portrayed as the divine Savior who embodies the very essence of God. God, in the beginning was the Word. That's who John is telling us about, like a divine, all-eternal God. Like, that's where you see all of the I am statements. I am the bread of life. I am the vine. I am the gate. Like, nobody comes to the Father except through me. Like that's who he's presenting him as, is just the light that shines in the darkness. We also get that imagery in there, but he's presented just as the ultimate source of hope, grace, life, salvation, sustenance, everything. Like whatever you could possibly need. That's who John is telling you about in this one.
Yeah, very cool.
So that's just kind of like a 30,000 foot view of what it looks like to start spending time in the Gospels and looking at it just slightly different, to see, okay, this is who he was writing to, or this is who the writer was writing to, and this is the type of Jesus they're presenting, since they are tailored for a very specific audience. But in all of them, you see the same Jesus come through, just looking at him from a slightly different angle. And so let's look at this clip from our senior pastor, Brian Hughes.
Before Jesus' intervention, before his sacrifice for us, a human high priest had to stand between us and God. But now Jesus Christ, who's God himself, he is our high priest. So the writer says, let's go right on into the presence of God. No more curtain, no more divide. And it's great news. We can encounter God with nobody standing in our way. And we can know God personally, because Jesus clearly told us this. He said, anybody who's seen me has seen the Father. Jesus' mission was to offer us a pathway to personally know God. And the pathway was him. To know Jesus is to know God.
So to know Jesus is to know God. Now, just want to give a quick, what Brian was talking about there was like at Jesus' crucifixion, the veil in the temple that the high priest went into to offer sacrifices for it was torn. And it's a really awesome, powerful story. And if you want to get that unpacked more, definitely check out the rest of the message, which the link to is in the show notes. You know, regardless of what portrait like you're looking at, just to continue to use that metaphor here, no matter what portrait you're looking at of Jesus, it's just a better way and a way to know God more. And I think that's the overall point of having these four representations of Jesus in the gospel, is because we can't know. If someone just came and told you a story, it wouldn't tell you everything that you needed to know about God. Right. But through this, it gives us a more complete picture of who he is.
Yeah, and I think it makes this conversation we've been having interesting too, because, you know, somebody might ask, how can I best get to know who Jesus is? And like, yes, you should read the four Gospels. That's a great place to start. Yes. But in reading the four, like, maybe we should try to paint our own portrait of him, just like the writers of the Gospels did. Now, just like Luke did, you could have the perspective of the four Gospel writers to help provide some of that context for you. But at the end of the day, I think the best way to truly know him and have a relationship with him is to try to build that relationship yourself and that portrait yourself, and kind of answer the question just like the writers of the Gospel did. Well, who is Jesus to me?
Yes. So. No, and I think that's a great way to go about it. You know, like you get individual testimonies from people, so you can hear what God has done in the lives of others. But then you also have to, you know, at least acknowledge like what your lived experience is. Sure. But the only way to do that is to invite Jesus to be a part of your life, and I mean, for me, it would just require a full submission to him. Yeah. And then just starting on that spiritual journey and saying, okay, like I'm going to live my life with Jesus and just go from there. So like if someone, I don't know, like what's the next step? So like you've listened to the podcast, like what do you do?
I think like the way I started reading the Bible when it kind of changed everything for me is, you know, you can read it just like you read, I think I made this reference before, you can read it like you read the terms and conditions, which is just, you just scroll through it like just to get done, basically. Yeah, so check the box. Yeah. Or a better option is you can read it to really try to understand it, and more importantly, well, what does this mean for me and my life? I think that's how, specifically when you read the Gospels, I think that's how you can get to know, well, who is Jesus to me, and how is he important and significant in my life.
No, and I fully agree with that. But one of the things that I did whenever I started reading was like, what do I do with this? Like I think I've mentioned before, like I would journal. Like what did I think I could apply this, how can I apply like what I'm actually reading? So I read this message from Jesus. I hear what he said. What do you do with it? Mm-hmm. Like if you're not going to act on it, I don't know how that's actually going to change. Like you read it, you take it in, and then you take a step of faith and act on whatever it is you think you're being prompted to do. And then another way is just to get in a group of people that are all seeking to do that exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And especially people who are a little further along than you, who have been where you're at, that you can learn a lot from them. And as far as how do you implement this into your life.
And I think that's whenever, Mark, like I really feel like that's kind of what he did. Like whenever you first, you get the Gospel of Mark, but then whenever you dig a little bit deeper and you see he was just a dude that was out there trying to go on a mission trip with some folks that were further along the way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Like, and when the more time you spend in the Bible, like the more little connections start jumping out that you probably never even thought about before.
Right.
I've read I've read Acts before. I've read Mark before. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew that was the same Mark, but I hadn't thought about that just until you said that. Like get with somebody that's a little bit further along the way.
Yeah.
That and Mark didn't get it right his first time. Like he dipped out early, went back to Jerusalem, caused some beef with him and Paul. Like it humanized him in a way that I hadn't really noticed before.
Right. Yeah.
And the more time you spend in the Bible, the more that's going to happen, especially regarding the person of Jesus.
Yeah. And depending on where you're at, you might have stumbled on this or checked it out because it popped up in your feed, and you're like, well, cool, but you might have this perception that the Bible and the teachings of Jesus, they don't have any real application for your day-to-day life. And I'm telling you, I can't encourage you enough. If you go into it with an open mind and just approach it like, how can I apply this to how I live my life daily? It'll change you.
Yes.
Simple as that. It'll change you because, as you know, his teaching is very practical and very relevant for us today. So
I think that's a great spot to end.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go further into the portraits of Jesus, what we talked about today, a great book that I found that really helped me to do that is this one right here. It's The Church's Portrait of Jesus by Linda McInnish Bridges. We're not getting paid anything for this, but I found this book. I read it a couple years ago. It really changed the way that I approached the Gospels. If you want to do that too, awesome resource. As always, if you leave us a review and we read it, we got one of these sick mugs coming your way. I thought this was a good episode. This was a good conversation.
This was fun. I learned a lot in this one.
I did too. So, all right, we'll see everybody here next week for another episode of The After Chat.
Thanks for joining us for The After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.